I could not comprehend that he was still alive because I knew he had one foot in the grave. And that was probably one of the hardest times ever, saying goodbye to him to go to the OR, because just looking at the doctors' faces, they went pale, and they knew what they were facing. And it's a testament to who Dave is and how strong he is.
Welcome to It's Settled, the Ametros podcast. Each episode, we're going to dig into the humanity in workers' compensation and insurance claims, exploring the stories of injured people and those who support them, as well as the good work professionals are doing in the industry. And now, I invite you to join me, Sean Dean, General Counsel at Ametros and the host of It's Settled. Now, it's settled. Let's get on to the episode. I couldn't be happier to be joined by David and Amanda Repsher. Got to know them a little bit here beforehand, and in my estimation, it's one of the most harrowing stories, and brings out just the best in perseverance and humanity, and overcoming all odds. I couldn't even begin to. Amanda said it best. There's just so many stories wrapped within stories through David and Amanda's journey, and we couldn't be happier to have them here. We certainly won't be able to get through everything, but I'm really hoping to highlight some of the incredible things and triumphs that David and Amanda have gone through in their journey. And I just say welcome and thank you so much for being here, David and Amanda. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you for having us, and we're looking forward to talking with you and sharing our story today.
Yeah, I guess so. Just to start for viewers here, and just to set the stage, why don't you talk a little bit about just the event that was, I have to imagine one of the most life-changing events in both of your lives, and what occurred in the accident you were involved in.
On July 3rd, 2015, I went to work as a flight nurse for a company here in Central Colorado, Flight for Life. And we're located up high in the mountains, kind of surrounded by a bunch of ski resorts, Breckenridge, Vail, that area. And it was a job I loved. It's a job I worked my whole life to get there. And I was really happy at work. And on that day, we were just going to a little public relations event, and what we call the touch truck, kind of land, and there's fire trucks and police cars and ambulances and all that, sort of a show and tell. And then something went catastrophically wrong on liftoff, and we ended up crashing in the back lot of the hospital, and I was immediately engulfed in flames, and I was burned on about 90% of my body. And I was then put back into another helicopter and flown to Denver, which is, I'm glad I wasn't conscious for that one, but by that point, it had already been sedated. And but it's what without it, I wouldn't have survived, without a doubt. And I was flown down to University of Colorado Hospital in Aurora, Colorado, and I spent 13 months, 397 days in the hospital.
Wow. Who else was involved in the in the initial accident?
So Patrick Mahaney, Brandon, an amazing pilot. He'd been flying for 28 years at that point, and unfortunately, he did not survive the crash. And my partner Matt, who was another nurse that I was working with that day, and he was severely injured, but he survived that flight and he went back to flying again. He came back to work after he recovered, and flew for several months. Now has gone on with a different career. He's been very successful. He's doing really well.
Yeah. So, and I'll ask Amanda if she can to fill in some of these details, because following the immediate aftermath of the accident and your recovery and rehabilitation, obviously having 90% of your body having sustained burns, you weren't conscious at that time. You were in a medically induced state, coma essentially. So you weren't there, and not to make you go through it, but just for the viewers to understand what this was like, for you, Amanda, from getting the initial indication that this accident happened to going to the hospital, and also knowing you both are nurses, so you both have medical background and you're very well trained. What was it like, for you just initially? Hour one.
Yes, as you mentioned, we're both critical care nurses, and we actually both worked for the same company at the time of the crash.
Gotcha.
I had actually worked at the hospital that Dave got sent to, Burn Center, for 5 years. We had just gotten back from an amazing river trip vacation up in Idaho, and my job was administrative, so I was on vacation through the end of that week. The crash happened on a Friday. And so that day, Dave got up really early and went and played hockey before going into work, which he did quite often. And I got up and went to the gym, and grocery store, came back, and I was making myself a sandwich. And I got a phone call from our good friend George. And there's an alert system in Summit County where things get pushed out, and I wasn't signed up for that at the time. And he knew I was alone, and he knew it was the Flight for Life helicopter. But he didn't tell me that. He just said, Amanda, there's a helicopter that crashed in Frisco, but everybody walked away. Of course, I went into panic mode, tried calling Dave on his cell phone, and he didn't answer, which wasn't unusual. He didn't always have his phone with him, and called the flight office. They didn't answer. And I was like, well, of course, if there's a helicopter crash, they're going to be helping out. And meantime, I kept telling myself, there's other helicopters that fly around in this county. It can't possibly be Dave. And then I was looking up the dispatch number for flights, and I got a phone call from our good friend that works at the hospital. And as soon as I saw his caller ID, my heart just fell out of my chest. And I just picked up the phone and I said, you tell me now what? And he said, he's alive. You got to get to the hospital now. And I said, well, somebody has to come pick me up. So they sent the ambulance supervisor. And in the meantime, I called Dave's mom. And they had just gotten back from a hike where they were at a cell service. Literally just walked in the door, and she picked up the phone. And I said, the helicopter crashed. He's alive. Get to the house now. And they live about 2 miles down the road from us. So they showed up. We hopped in the ambulance supervisor vehicle when it arrived, and went lights and sirens to the hospital. And this is a resort community. So on July 3rd, there was just people everywhere. And I got to the hospital, and I jumped out and ran in and took a look at him. And I used to work in Burn Center in the ER, so I knew he was very severely burned. And everybody was just working so hard. And they're, friends of ours. They're taking care of everybody in the ER. And when they called for the helicopter to come get him, we were loading him into the helicopter, and the winds were starting to blow, and the rain was coming down. And I just looked at the chief flight nurse was hugging me. I'm like, are we really putting him back in a helicopter right now?
Yeah.
But I knew that was the only way he had a chance to live, because he was on death's door at that moment. And then Dave and his mom and stepdad, we made our way down to Denver.
Gotcha. And so walk me through the timeline a little bit from, he's in Denver, he's being treated, to where he's conscious, and Dave, where you understood what was going on at that point.
Well, when I was in the hospital in Frisco, I knew how sick I was, and right before they sedated me to to innovate me. I just looked up at the nurse and said, tell Amanda I love her. And then it was black. It was just, the ketamine set in, and
Yeah.
it was a black hole for, I woke up 5.5 months later when they started peeling the sedation off. And I was terrified, but I kind of had a vague idea of what had happened. And, but for me, when I woke up, and I describe it as just like a camera shutter, it just literally went from like dark to light. And I was awake. I mean, not fully awake, obviously. I was still trying to figure things out. But my first sensation was that I couldn't move anything. I couldn't talk. The only way I could communicate was, mouthing words. And so I was scared to death. I had no idea. At that time, I had no idea the passage of time. I didn't know if it was, a matter of days or months or even years, but I could have been lying in that bed. So I was scared, and I knew this was not a good situation at that point. This is, I've always been a very active person, and, and being on the other side of this, taking care of patients, it was a situation that I never wanted to be in. Just being totally dependent on care. And, so again, I was scared, and, Amanda saw that I was awake, and, so after 5.5 months of her taking care of me, the very first words I mouthed to her was, "I want to die." And, that's how scary it was. And obviously at that point, Amanda started talking to me, and I realized that once I got my passenger valve back on and I could actually speak, and it's like, oh yeah, I can move my limbs. And, so we just started going through things, and Amanda told me like the same story probably 10 times, what had happened and everything that's gone on. And, the medical team came in and, very bluntly gave me an assessment of what had happened and what my outlook is, and how tough of a journey it would be. And, and after a little while and, kind of digesting that, we just decided to go forward. And that was, never really looked back after that. And, it was a very long, complicated hospital course, but eventually made it through on the other side.
Yeah. And so we'll get to all the good stuff. But just still setting the stage. There was a number that struck me when Amanda explained it. There's a calculation they do for burn victims based upon age and gender and bunch of different factors. And they basically plug it into a formula. And there was 140? I don't know why that number is sticking out. 140% chance you weren't going to make it. So not even 100. You're talking about you're in the negatives. And I guess my questions to Amanda. And I know you don't know any other way because you're a trained medical professional, but in that moment when it's your husband, your best friend, do you wish you almost didn't have that training? Was it helpful to have that background that you did? Or was it a blessing and a curse?
I've been asked that question a lot, and, not knowing what it would have been like to go through that without the medical knowledge, I can just go off of my best assessment from taking care of patients and family members who don't have that background. And I think it was helpful. I didn't have to have people explain things to me. But at the same time, I knew the impossibility of Dave actually making it through. That first night when we first got to the hospital at university, he had already gone through the ER and he was up in the burn unit, and they had him in what's called the tub room. And the charge nurse met me at the door, and I said, I have to be with him. He said, well, we don't let family members back in the tub room. And I said, I know, but I'm a nurse and I used to work here and I've seen him already, and I want to be there with him if he's going to die. I don't want him to die alone. So they let me back. And from that moment forward, I became part of the care team, which was a very unique scenario, the medical team was incredibly welcoming with open arms to let me be part of that process. And so I was there every day, pretty much all day. I ended up moving into an apartment on the edge of campus. And, one of my biggest fears was that when Dave did become aware again, when the medications were worn off, that I wouldn't be there and he would be terrified and not be able to see me. So I just was always vigilant about being with him. And I heard stories from other burn patients about, oh yeah, the first time I became aware, I saw the housekeeper cleaning the room and I didn't know where I was. And I was like, don't want that to happen to Dave. And, in terms of his state, the burn surgeon got us all together. There were like 100 people in the conference room that night between friends and coworkers. And he said, I don't expect him to make it through the night. And you guys all need to be prepared. And if by some whatever he makes it, you guys are in for a marathon. And then it was the next day when we sat down with the surgeons that they told us about that 140% negative chance of survival.
What were some of the initial, and maybe it's for folks who are burn victims or caretakers of burn victims, and forgive my ignorance in asking the question. So when my limited knowledge, you hear things about skin grafts, but when you're talking about 90% burns, like where are they finding skin? I mean, what's the course of treatment when it's that severe?
Well, I'm thankful. Obviously, I had the little protection that I did have on really enabled me to survive. One of them was wearing a helmet, so my scalp was intact.
Okay.
And also, I'll give out a shout out to Hanes underwear because turns out cotton is flame retardant. So my whole perineal area and all that was spared. So they ended up, with the skin grafts, you can get a donor skin graft, but just like any organ or any foreign substance, your body begins to reject it. And so it's sort of a temporary recovery until you can put your own skin over the burns. So they would have to, get skin from me, my scalp. Was it 5-6 times?
Yeah, your scalp was 5 times.
And my scrotum, it was 8 times.
Wow.
So that turned out to be one of the biggest areas. And then
you also had the reference books in your chest and leg pocket that spared those 2 areas.
Yeah.
They just kind of rotate tubes. You have to wait for that skin to grow back. And then, they did some other things that I can, hit on about other coverings and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and the first 2 weeks that he was in the hospital, he went to the OR every day for them to excise to get rid of the burned tissue. And there were parts of his body where they, like his lower legs, they had to go all the way down to the bone to get rid of the burned dead tissue. And so that's the process you go through first before you can even start the grafting. And then they harvested one of the areas that was not burned, that was protected, and they sent it off to a lab in Boston where they grow these epicell tissue, which ends up being like a covering when you do this grafting. And
Gotcha.
it helps the graft to take. So the first graft procedure that he went through, he had already been in the hospital for over a month.
One thing that's striking to me in the interviews I've watched with you, David, and footage I've seen, I mean, you're one of the most positive dudes I've ever. I haven't had the pleasure. I hope to someday meet you in person, but I feel like I know you and Amanda, but I've never heard once you complain about the pain. And I have to imagine the pain. I'm sure you received, folks are working to make you comfortable, but there's no way you're getting through that without, probably the most intense amount of pain imaginable. How did you work through the pain? Because, we're a lot of folks who listen to the podcast have had work-related injuries or injuries in general, certainly nowhere to the extent you have, but talk about that. How do you work through the pain? Because you must have had to do a lot of physical therapy and things that just were not comfortable.
Honestly, there is no comfortable part about the whole experience. It's my heart goes out to every burn victim out there, and anyone else that's injured for that matter. But, it is a miserable experience, and no one should ever have to go through that. And there are times where the pain it's just indescribable. There really aren't words for it, and the medications certainly have their place. I think looking back, probably the most difficult place for me was the tub room. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a big steel, stainless steel table. And they take you back there every day and to wash your skin, because infection is, a huge risk with the burn victim. And so they take you back there. And, at the time, after I woke up to start feeling all this, I had dropped down to, at my lowest was 89 pounds. And I still had open areas on my body, my coccyx, my tailbone was still exposed. And so just lying on that bed with exposed bone and just the cold and the pain. I would beg, I'd beg for everything I could get.
Yeah.
We kind of had a whole schedule, but, as time went on and, the physical therapy, same thing, if you spend that much time in the hospital, and, not to get into too many nitty-gritty details, but there's a thing that's called HO, or heterotropic ossification. Literally, your joints start to calcify. And so you lose all the movement in all your joints. And there's really only a couple ways to get through that, and that's extensive stretching and to try to break it up, or in some cases you have to have surgery, and the skin stretching and all that. So the PT was brutal, but I kind of got to a point where I realized that the pain medications didn't touch it. The pain was so intense, and I knew there was going to be an end. We stopped the physical therapy and stuff like that. And so I just reached a point, I can't remember what exactly it was. It's like I just stopped taking the pain meds. And, I knew it would be a bit of a supper fest to get through the physical therapy. But once it was done, it was done. If I kept taking all those medications, it wouldn't really help the pain in the moment, because unless I honestly was unconscious, the pain was that bad. So I just quit taking them. And I don't recommend that for anyone, but it worked for me. And I just found that the side effects of the medications, it wouldn't help me during the physical therapy, and then I'd be sleepy for 3 or 4 hours and feel like jumping, afterwards. So I just quit taking it. And after a while, I just got used to it, and it worked for me. And but it pain's hard. It makes you tired. It makes everything just that much harder.
And you're dealing with, your skin's the largest organ in your body. So it's not like, and certainly not to belittle anyone else's injuries, but typically it's isolated. It's something, you fracture your leg, or it's head trauma. Or, when you're dealing with something to the extent, at least as far as I understand the extent to your injuries, it's the whole body. So you're dealing with things like infection all the time. And, I, at least from my vantage point, it seems like you've been through things that if any one person went through them, they'd be life-changing, but you went through multiple things like that. And one that sticks out, I'm aware that you had heart surgery during this whole thing. That in and of itself is traumatic for you and your family and everything going on. But, how do you deal with that when you're like, okay, I'm making progress, and now you're telling me I need to have open heart surgery? It's baffling.
So, December 3rd, 2015, Dave does not remember this. And honestly, it was another situation where nobody expected him to survive what he went through. And statistically speaking, a healthy person who comes in like from a car crash and has that kind of devastating injury to their chest has a really significant high rate of death, more so than survival. And so that's where being that nurse came into play with this. And he developed uncontrolled bleeding in his chest. So the cardiac thoracic surgeons had to take him urgently to the OR, crack his chest open. He had multiple liters of blood that they got out. And as they were wheeling him to the OR, I could not comprehend that he was still alive because I knew he had one foot in the grave. And that was probably one of the hardest times ever, saying goodbye to him to go to the OR, because just looking at the doctors' faces, they went pale, and they knew what they were facing. And it's a testament to who Dave is and how strong he is, that he could pull through that, and obviously having the amazing medical care. Being as burned as he was 5 months in. He was only about half of his body covered. He was in septic shock. He had been for months. He had pneumonia in his lungs. And the next few days were terrifying. He stayed there with his chest open. And then when they tried to take him back in to close it, they couldn't close it all the way. So for several months, he had an open chest wound that he was dealing with. And it was December 14th when he became aware, because we had started peeling away the sedative medications, worried that his brain had taken a huge hit during that event. And me knowing Dave and how he wants to live his life, that was a constant fear of mine, that what would his recovery look like? And I knew how he wanted to live his life, and he wouldn't want to be in a nursing home, and having to have full assistance.
Yeah.
So that was terrifying. And like Dave said, when he woke up, he looked me straight in the eye, and I knew he was back, because he hadn't done that for 5 months, 5.5 months. And even though he had the sensation that he couldn't talk and couldn't move, in fact, we had just had him sitting up on the edge of the bed doing physical therapy, and we had just taken his talking valve off to suction him. So
yeah.
I obviously didn't do this alone, without my wife by my side, and a whole legion of friends and family and strangers, pulling for us. That's really what got me through. I think got us through. It's just, at some point it almost becomes doing it not just for yourself, but for all those, helping you too. Like, you want to make them proud. You want to reward their effort for you, and it's not a linear progression, I can tell you, unfortunately. I certainly had a small percentage of beating the odds to make, survive, but I also was, had every complication. I got to every complication you can think of. And, so it was good days and bad days. And, for a long time, the bad days would outnumber the good days. And, I can't remember at what point actually it turned into, it flipped. And, that was certainly a welcome, because you'd be making good progress, and then I get sick, septic again, and gone for 2 weeks. And then, kind of repeat the whole cycle. But, it's hard. And for whatever reason, I don't know how, but I just tried to keep looking forward. I never really dwelled on what happened to me, and dwelled on the accident, or I just kept trying to look forward. And a lot of the times it was completely unrealistic. I'm like, I'll 3 months from now, I'll be out of the hospital. I'll get back in my kayak and we're going on a trip or something, But
well, you're reading my mind, because I've seen footage of you in your kayak. You play hockey. You clearly before, and afterward, you're incredibly active. At what point did it click, and what was your mindset with, like, I'm going to do this, like, I'm going to walk, I'm going to get out of here. I'm like, I'm going to push it. And, what was that moment for you? Or was it a gradual progression, just minute by minute?
I think it was just, like, there's only one way I just thought there was only one way to go. It's like, just keep going forward and give it the best shot. And, it's each day brought its own adventure, I guess, and, after a while, towards the end of the hospitalization and all that, it's like, it changed to becoming like, okay, now I know I'm getting out of here, but I want my independence back.
Yeah.
And so, my very first goal was I want to walk to the bathroom and go to the bathroom by myself. It's and it's very powerful motivation, for me. And but it was weird. Like, I'd been in bed for 11 months, and just trying to find the strength and learning how to walk again. So it was going from a very from being a big athlete to not even be able to walk. It was eye opening, and it was very slow. And but again, I don't know how. I just tried to keep looking forward. And that's the only piece of advice I can give to people. And the best piece of advice is just try not to dwell on what happened in the situation, and just try to keep moving forward somehow.
It's simple, but it's so powerful. And I think, I mean, it really hits home for me, because you can't, someone who's an outsider has a hard time just processing, but both emotionally and intellectually, what you've been through. I mean, it's almost like you couldn't even make it up in a Hollywood movie. It's too much for one person, one couple to endure. So I think your message is spot on. I mean, you just keep going. And for me, that's super inspirational, but it must be hard when you have setbacks. So I'll just jump forward. So you're out, you're back home, your body's been through a ton of stuff. You are on dialysis, right? And it's not looking good for your kidneys. So at some point in time, it's looking like you need a kidney transplant. Like, how do you even process that? I mean, you're like, okay, we finally got out, we're okay. I mean, what's that setback like, and what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, again, like, I'm so blessed to have Amanda. If I was having a bad day, chances are she wasn't, or vice versa. And you don't go through this alone. It's like your loved ones. And, it's like she had to pick up the pieces of my life and really do all my care. Again, we were out of the hospital. It was scary because we were out of the hospital. And take care of ourselves. And thankfully, Amanda was being the excellent nurse she is, but there's more to it than that. It's still your whole life and everything else going on around it. And so it's helpful to remember that the spouses and families are just as affected by this as the person that got hurt. But like you were there doing dialysis 5 nights a week. Thankfully, we were able to do it at home, and just with the antibiotics, the infections, and just the trauma. I lost my kidneys and my hearing. So, it's being on dialysis keeps you alive, but it's no way to live. It's like you don't really live. It's right. The diet, the fluid restrictions, the medications, all the side effects.
How do you even travel? I mean, if you wanted to go somewhere.
Well, there's actually a funny story.
We did once.
Yeah, and I mean, we have video clips and pictures of what production it was to do the dialysis. We were at the apartment on the edge of campus at university, and just boxes piled everywhere in the machine. It's all hooked into the plumbing system and everything. But so the NTSB report for the crash came out in March of 2017. And it was really important for us to go there in person. So that was Washington, D.C. And so I still to this day have no idea how I pulled this off. I mean, we took the machine on the plane, and we had all of the supplies delivered to the hotel. And then we had another huge suitcase with supplies that we couldn't have delivered that we had to bring ourselves. So we had the machine, the big suitcase, plus our luggage. And it's just crazy to even think back that, like I said, I don't know how we pulled that one off. Sitting in the hotel room doing dialysis.
It was great to travel. And it was our first time to DC. So we still were able to get out and walk and investigate. But it was, the Children's Hospital transport team came over and helped us get to the airport and back. It's like,
we had all the special letters from the doctors, like, this is what this equipment is.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But it takes, so it's all you do. If you're on dialysis, it's all you do.
So you went through the transplant process. That obviously gave you a lot of freedom back. At what point, I want to focus on the happy stuff too, because this is super heavy. And I know it must be heavy for you, and hopefully it's a little cathartic too as well. But and obviously Amanda's rocking the D Repsher. But at what point do you say, okay, now we're going to start to find some good in this? Obviously there's good in through the whole thing. But at what point are you like, okay, we're going to bring other folks into the fold, and we're going to raise awareness, and we're going to make this a positive thing?
I think really when I woke up for the first time in the hospital, around that time, I asked to see some of the people that, Matt, my partner, and then Karen, Patrick's wife, came over, but really once I started waking up, we kind of made the decision that we want to do everything we possibly could to make sure this didn't happen to anyone else. And, so that was a big motivation to just try to get healthy, get out there and spread the word. So once we got the transplant, that's when I think we both considered really the start of my recovery. Because up until that point, like I said, you're just kind of making it through each day. And then,
And there's a real deadline. The expected life expectancy on dialysis is 5 years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, once Matt Martinez, our angel, my new brother, came in and, became a donor, and, literally that it was life-changing. Every cliche you can think about with organ transplant is absolutely true. It is truly saves lives. And, but, after that, we really started being able to get out and travel more and speak more. And we partnered with Karen. We've been doing a lot of work on the legislative front. And so we started going to conferences and telling our story, which was horrifying to begin with. It's very emotional to tell a story, especially for a group of strangers that you're trying to influence. But over time, it just becomes more comfortable, and so to this day, we're still out there, kind of making the circuit, especially now that COVID's somewhat better, and just trying to work for better helicopter safety legislation and organ donor awareness and everything else we can think of.
My in hearing your story, in seeing all the things Amanda went through, obviously my heart went out to you, David. I mean, physically you went through it, but I was almost, just devastated seeing Amanda going through all this, because, there were points where you weren't even conscious, but she's bearing the full emotional brunt and weight. And you still kept going. I mean, every day you're going to the hospital, showing up, part of his care team. It's really remarkable. I know you don't need thanks from me, but it's super inspirational to see And I mean, in many regards, you're like the most positive person I've ever seen. I mean, the fact that you've gone through this and you're sitting there smiling, and it's so neat and special to see that there's like a happy ending after this, for you, and that there's some good that can come out of it, out of something that's just so hard, and still today is clearly super hard. And I guess for you as a caregiver, Amanda, what's some advice or words of wisdom that you can give to someone? There was a quote that you said, I'm going to probably butcher it, so forgive me. It's something like, you can dance with the river, but the river always leads. And it's sort of this, there's so much out of our control. And you just got to go with the flow. That's what I took from it. And maybe it's oversimplified, but I'll stop talking. I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
No, you got the quote right. And we have a lot to smile about. And as Dave said, we didn't get through this alone. We had an army of our family and friends and even complete strangers supporting us. And I mean, I drew off of Dave's strength. He was fighting so hard to live. And so I said, as long as he's fighting, I've got his back. I'm going to fight there with him. I had a sticky note above my computer at the apartment that I would look at every day. And it said, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be that strong. And, I just got up every day and just dealt with what was in front of me. And as long as he was still there, we were in the fight. So, and I do have to, I know there will be a lot of medical people listening to this, and just say how crucial it was that the medical team welcomed me with open arms. I mean, they could have shut me out. They could have been offended or defensive about me being there every day. And I was part of rounds every morning. I would ask questions. And it got to the point after several months where, they were having a discussion about how long it had been since one of his lines was replaced. And the poor residents trying to frantically look it up on the computer. And the surgeon just looks at me and goes, when was it, Amanda? And I told him. So, it's that part was huge. And everybody became so vested in Dave. And that's a message I'd like to say too, that's okay. As a caregiver, a medical provider, you can become vested in your patients. And, multiple times one of them would come in and say, oh, I had a dream about Dave last night. I was laying in bed awake thinking about how to help Dave more. And that was huge. And that gave me strength too. I was part of the team to take care of him. And we also were blessed to have our other angel, Franny, our case manager, who was there just nonstop, and can't speak highly enough from the workman's comp end. She was brought in, and just what a difference that made.
Yeah, that warms my heart, because oftentimes, and we're so at Ametros, we're so close to that process and helping people like you and David after an accident. There's a big push within the workers' compensation industry to show empathy and really be there for people, and no people are more deserving than that empathy than you both. How did you come to Ametros, and what's your experience been like there? I know you've worked with Robin before.
Yeah, well, first of all, the gang at Ametros is just phenomenal. Everybody that we've had contact with from the very beginning, top notch, so incredibly supportive. Once we transitioned off of our workman's comp scenario into this Medicare set-aside account, the torch was handed off from Franny, and so it's been Anna Veloz Parks was my first person that we worked with, and now we're with Robin Kavanaugh, and just to have that, all I had to do is shoot an email, and boom, things happen. And that was Franny's job when Dave was in the hospital. So to have that kind of support now, it's awesome.
That's awesome to hear. So what is the future hold for you both?
we'll see what tomorrow brings. But no, I mean we're really trying to get back to just doing stuff for ourselves a little bit too. Trying to set some time aside for ourselves and get back to some of the activities that we used to really enjoy. Part of this whole process, I still have some medical issues I deal with, mostly with skin issues, which is no surprise. But getting back on the river and being out in the sun and all that kind of stuff presents some challenges. So we're just trying to still navigate that and find the best way to get through that. And other than that, we're enjoying sort of getting back into the safety world a little bit again. And we started a business out in Western Colorado, so that's been taking some time. And I don't know, we're looking forward just back to living. Hopefully COVID goes away for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I know that neither of you set out. I mean, you're both followed careers to help people. I mean, you were in the line of duty when this occurred, and you didn't certainly, neither of you picked this path to go down. But whether you like it or not, you're an inspiration for a lot of people out there, and you carry that badge with a great deal of grace and humility and a good sense of humor and just warmth and kindness. So I'm not going to talk too much because I don't want to start crying, but I'm just so grateful to have met you and have gotten the chance to have spoken with you both, and have just been inspired and is someone who, I mean, I look at both you, David and Amanda, and go, I could never do that. I could never do that. In either of your shoes, I couldn't do that. Getting to meet two real superheroes, I'm like, you know what? If I had to, I could. I think I could. I'd certainly have to call you up and go, I don't know that I can, and get a pep talk, but I guess it's a long way of saying, thank you for being, true inspirations.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, thank you. And sometimes it's kind of weird, but like sometimes you don't feel like your inspiration, you're just kind of getting through yourself. But it's we really hope by sharing our story that someone can take, even if it's a little thing out of it. If that helps them get through their own journey, then that's really what it's all about. And we miss it. I miss what I did. I really do. I love my job. And now we're in this position, and like everything, we're just trying to make the best of it as well. We're lucky to have people around us, and we know sometimes people don't have that luxury, and it's hard to go through it with a lot of help. And so, if you know someone is out there alone, try to give them a hand somehow.
Yeah, we've been blessed on so many levels, and so we just try to do what we can to, like Dave said, share our story and help whoever we might be able to help. And we didn't really talk about burn survivor support, but that's something we're also active with. So.
Yeah. Well, with that, you've certainly inspired me, and I know the folks listening, you've inspired them as well. So thank you for taking part in this conversation today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of It's Settled, the Ametros podcast. For more information and episodes, you can visit us at our website at ametros.com. That's ametros.com. Or head over to iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. We hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to sharing more stories of people overcoming their workplace accidents and bodily injury claims, and those who are working hard to make a difference for them. So it's settled. We'll see you next time.